This is the DarshanTalks podcast. Regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. We have two very special guests with us. We've got Omar Khateeb and Keith. Keith, I forgot your last name again. I'm sorry.
No, that's awesome. Keith Pieper.
Keith Pieper. And
Yes.
Omar, you want to introduce yourself first? And then we'll have Keith introduce himself.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Omar Khateeb. I'm a Texan who's currently living in the Bay Area. I work as the director of growth for a company called Potrero Medical. Potrero Medical is a medical device company focused on predictive health. We have a critical care monitoring platform that's used in operating rooms and ICUs. We focus primarily on acute kidney injury and abdominal compartment syndrome. And essentially through automating the data capture and physiological processes, we're collecting a lot of data, helping clinicians make better decisions, and long-term we're building an artificial intelligence platform.
Which I think is really interesting. Honestly, I listened to a lot of that, Omar, and the first thing that popped out at me is you can pull the Texan out of Texas, but you can't make him stop talking about being a Texan, which was awesome.
I became more Texan the moment I moved out to the Bay Area, I'll be honest with you.
Fair enough. And Keith, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So Keith Pieper, I currently work for Salix Pharmaceutical, marketing director of marketing for the retail side, for the consumer and the HCP side. I've been there for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I was at an organization called Ferring, everywhere from training to regional sales manager to marketing for probably every franchise the organization had. And prior to that, I was at GlaxoSmithKline, carried the bag for about 4 to 5 years before transitioning over to Ferring into sales leadership and then marketing for the last, I'm dating myself, but for the last probably 12 plus years.
So what I find really interesting in Keith's background especially is the fact that you've really done the full gamut. You've sort of seen the evolution of pharma in many ways, in terms of the fact that you've carried the bag, you've sort of called on the physicians, and you've done the whole sales thing and the marketing thing. What I find interesting about that, Keith, is this idea that this whole time we as an industry have been targeting physicians, and now we're sort of pivoting. We're pivoting towards patients. First of all, is that a big change, or is that really the same thing, and we just ignored something and now it's coming back into focus?
I think it's a great question. I think it was early on with the days of back in the day with the Zolofts and the Lipitors and the Viagras, where the market research really told marketers that there's a grant rate, right, of 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, whatever that may be, 6 out of 10 requests, that when a patient asks a physician about a specific product, that the physician, whether it's 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times that grant rate, will honor that request. And I think that's kind of been the catalyst for getting into this DTC world. Now, not every product, not every brand, is suitable for that DTC space. But I think that marketers have found great results, right, from following consumers. And now we're at a point where we're sophisticated enough, and I'm in an organization now where Salix is one of the leader in the GI space. And from a digital standpoint, non-personal standpoint, we work with different partners to really track everything we do, and we can see firsthand that return on ad spend, return on investment, because we tag every asset. So we've gotten to a point now where it's so sophisticated working with our third parties that we know from the time to exposure to the time to prescription for a consumer, and having that surround sound integrated approach where it's not just one channel, but it might be programmatic, it might be display, it might be search, it might be endemic sites, whatever that may be. It might be email. It's that surround sound. When you start layering in the integrated platform, we can really track time to exposure to prescription. And I think that's where we're at now, where we're really seeing the benefits of reaching out to consumers and encouraging them, educating them and encouraging them to speak to their physician about this brand, about this product.
Omar, this is the perfect segue into a lot of what you do, which is you talk about really being able to track patients. And obviously Keith and Salix do a great job at it. But what do you see as someone who works with a number of companies, do you see this level of sophistication in most pharma? And if so, where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, and that's with regards to marketing directly to patients and finding a way to empower the patient with the right materials to discuss it with the physician.
And tracking them to the extent that they have been.
Yeah, so this is definitely something that's kind of straight out of I would say the surgical robotics playbook, which is, if somebody's going to invest in a surgical robot where most of the time they don't have reimbursement set up yet. So the robot is really a strategic acquisition for a hospital to get more patients to go there. So the other side of it is, how does that company, and I think Intuitive really pioneered this, which is how do you do a lot of marketing and PR to educate patients? So on that side, I think the medical device industry knows how to do that fairly well. But what I would say that they don't know how to do, and I'll be honest, I've never seen a medical device company do this, because I hate to say this, they're rather behind on doing these kind of sophisticated things that pharma does. They don't know how to track it. And I think that the tracking can be something as simple as, in aesthetic medicine, they actually do a good job, which is if you market directly to patients through a lead gen, and then you direct those patients, for example, to the nearest provider in their area, then there's some way to sort of see what's happening with that patient, and then you follow up with the physician. But I think the one thing with this is that either you do this via software and SaaS, which is really, really expensive, or you do this manually, where you follow up with physician practices and try and correlate the data. But then that becomes very, that's also a resource constraint, because now you're having to spend time internally figuring that out.
So let me ask.
I think, and I apologize, Darshan, but
please.
I think one of the aspects is to the point where it's so sophisticated. Obviously, we de-identify. We work with third parties where we de-identify, or they are, and the patients themselves, right? So it's really just uncovering time to exposure for whatever ID that may be, and then does that channel actually work to not only educate that patient or possible consumer, potential consumer, but does it encourage them enough to talk to their physician about their condition, talk to their physician about the appropriate treatment, and then mention the brand. Would this brand necessarily help me solve this issue that I have? And I think one of the last aspects that I think is really interesting is even addressable TV, where we used to do these national broadcast television commercials, but now we've gotten to the point we're so sophisticated where the cable companies have partnered with these different data houses, and now we have addressable TV, where we can, based on micro neighborhoods and diagnosis codes, not necessarily identifying any patient, but really targeting areas that are more prevalent with a specific diagnosis than others. And through the cable companies, we can actually get to a point where we're targeting different micro neighborhoods, where one town may have, this commercial playing, where another town or another couple blocks away, the cable providers or the residents, the homeowners, aren't seeing that commercial. So we got to a point now where we can be pretty sophisticated in our targeting approach, which I think may change in the future, but that's where we are now.
It's really interesting. I want to talk about the targeting approach a little bit more, but the thing that really popped out at me, and I hadn't heard this number before, so Keith, thank you for educating me on this, where you said that 6 or 7 out of 10 people who ask for a specific medication, the physician will usually agree to that request. I'd never heard that specific number tied to it before. My question for you is, as we enter into a world that's supposed to be patient-centric, two questions pop out at me. The first one is, do we build trust in a way that patients would believe pharma, or do they feel like they're sort of being mentally, what's the word I'm looking for, compelled to ask for certain medications versus others? And the same question that goes along with it is, do you think that we should also have a responsibility as an industry when we target these patients, that should they also know when the medicine isn't right for them? And do we do a good job doing that? And when I say medicine, obviously, Omar, I'm including devices as well.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, I think those are great questions. So I think, reacting to the physician, I think, has the ultimate responsibility of determining what medicine is appropriate. And, the different categories, right? The different prevalence of conditions. Are there 16 million? Are there 8 million? Are there 6 million, people with this condition? How do we educate these consumers enough about the condition? And to your first question, it's absolutely imperative that we build trust. And it's not about just pushing the brand. It's about building trust with the consumer to make sure that we're educating the consumers on the condition itself, the different options that are available. A lot of senior leadership, to a certain degree, they'll question why so much of an investment in unbranded. Well, I think unbranded is a great part of a journey to educate consumers, to make sure that consumers not only understand the disease state, the condition, the symptoms, but there are solutions, and you can ask your physician about those potential solutions. You don't have to suffer in silence. And then the branded portion comes in, where it's about educating the consumers about the different aspects of the product, the clinical aspects, the safety, and the benefit that the product may provide. But still, it's about encouraging patients to ask their physician if this is appropriate. But the biggest thing we can do, I think, is using modern technology, using the data we have to connect patients or potential patients with physicians to seek solutions for a condition that they're suffering from. And I think that's one of the biggest aspects from that we can do as the healthcare industry.
Omar, do you want to respond to that question as well?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with Keith on this. Is that, and it's been like, I think, 10 years, so it's not something that's new. But for a lot of marketers, it is, just because they're not aware of it. Google partnered with a third party, I believe, called Third Bridge, and they mapped out the patient's digital journey. And the thing that they found, which is not surprising, is that when it comes to healthcare, before a patient decides like what, let's say, solution they're going to look for, whether it's a provider or, let's say, specific type of technology or therapeutic, they start with trying to give a name to the problem, right? So if someone has a certain type of ailment, they're not going to know that name. They're just going to know the symptoms. I have lower back pain. I have shooting pain down my leg, right? And so the key for our industry is, how do you go more upstream and meet the patient to where they are at that moment and educate them, again, in a non-branded way, meaning, you're not talking about your product, you're not talking about anything. All you're doing is trying to help the patient identify their problem, give a name to it, understand it, and then move and sort of walk them down through the buyer's journey, as Keith was alluding to. And then at some point towards the end of that buyer's journey, where they've taken all these symptoms, they have identified the problem, they've given the problem a name, so let's just say it's scoliosis, for example, or some type of
diabetes, whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And after they've named it and everything, they've got some education, then towards the end, that's when you can start providing some more education that involves your solution to that problem, right? And I think that it's not just with patients, it's with doctors, it's with all of us. Nobody's interested in getting like pitched these days, right? This is ended a long time ago. People are interested in sort of going down a buyer's journey. So, I mean, look, there's if anyone's familiar with, there's a product called a Theragun. It's that little gun. It's a percussive device that you use for massage. So I've seen that. I've gone through a buyer's journey with them. The first thing it was just kind of like, hey, when you work out, you have a lot of different areas where you have knots, you're sore and everything. You can't afford to just always go to a massage therapist. So sometimes you have to find ways to like relieve those knots, et cetera, et cetera. And then, at some point when I've identified the name to my problem, I learned about it, then Theragun started showing more of their product, which is like, hey, here's how you use the product. You can use it in these ways. Here's how other people use it. And then me seeing those images and visuals of people like me using it, how they're using it, all these things. Then at some point, like I converted, right? And I just purchased it. It's a fantastic product. That's the way people in healthcare need to think about consumerization, whether it's with patients or with physicians. It's a very empathetic process that you have to walk it down and be disciplined and not just throwing up features and benefits of your product right away.
But let me ask you this question.
I think, I'm sorry, Darshan. Yeah. One last aspect of that also is, and I think that this is one thing that outside of the healthcare industry, people don't understand. But if you're running a brand, you're running a franchise, you're running the organization, one thing that I think we don't talk about enough, but on the pharmaceutical side, and one of the reasons that we want to educate patients and encourage those patients to speak to their physicians, really, you have to understand that market landscape. The market access landscape as well. What is that insurance aspect? What is the insurance landscape and the coverage for your product as well? And this is where physicians they have so much information, right? It's amazing how much they can actually absorb from, everything that they treat. So they can't necessarily be experts on every single product out there or necessarily every single formulary and tier that every product is on. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of products out there, whether they're generic, just treating individual symptoms that are on the preferred formulary list. So insurance companies are dictating to physicians based on the tiering structure that this product is preferred and has to be used, even through a step edit, where if you want to use a product that may actually work to the mechanism of action, actually does, work on the disease itself. And it should be based on the clinical outcomes. But there are a couple other products, even generic products, that might work on individual symptoms, not necessarily the condition itself. A lot of times, insurance companies dictate to the physician they have to step through these. So I think reaching out to consumers and educating consumers is another way to help with this request for physicians. So when a physician says, here's what I think you have, but I have to prescribe this product, this generic product first to step through, it'll work on this individual symptom, but not necessarily the overall condition. However, if there's a prior authorization, sometimes the physician, if the patient pushes hard enough and says, you know what, I've learned about my condition, I've learned about my symptoms, and I really do think that, the benefits of this product will help me more so than just one individual, treating this one individual symptom. Sometimes a simple prior authorization by the office will help navigate that as well. So really encouraging patients and educating patients and encouraging patients to explore these options with their physicians, I think it helps not just from an education standpoint, helping physicians, hear these requests, but also overcome some of these market access barriers that insurance companies are really pushing harder and harder.
So let me ask you this question, and I know we're sort of bumping up on time, but let's sort of ask the last question, which was, a lot of this is happening in the context of tracking a patient through their patient journey. The way we've always tracked them is using cookies, and cookies are falling out of favor. I mean, we talked offline a few minutes ago. France is already fining Google, and I think it was Amazon. It was 135 million and like 45 million for using cookies inappropriately, which I assume ties into the GDPR fines. But if we're going into a world where you cannot track patients using cookies, therefore have difficulty tracking patients and their journeys, what does that new journey look like when we can't track the individual patients? To Omar.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that. I mean, look, that's a core business to these large tech giants.
Yeah.
So that's not going to go away. It's just going to evolve and change into something else and be named something else. So, I mean, like, for the audience that's not familiar, what is cookies? Cookies is just a simple way where if I go to a website and you cookie me, then if I go somewhere else, you're able to kind of follow me around and sort of remarket to me, right? So these days, what marketers have found is that, okay, if let's say I'm trying to generate a lead, right, through a white paper download, I'm spending all this money to drive somebody off, let's say Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter to my landing page on my website, right? But if I end up with the same outcome by using a lead generation objective, let's say on Facebook, then why do I need that extra step? I don't really care if they go to my website. I'll just do it through Facebook. They're going to make me pay for it, but I'll just do it that way because it's more effective, right? Because at the end of the day, Facebook has a way to control, and they're not going to say this. They're not going to optimize people leaving Facebook to go to your website. They don't really care about your website. They don't care about you. You and I, all of us who are on there, if you're not paying anything, you are the product. You are the thing being sold. And if you're an advertiser, you got to pay to play, period. And so if I could imagine 5-10 years from now, what that looks like, assuming that, let's say, cookies is obliterated from the face of the earth, that's only going to just change to, instead of cookies being on your website and everything, it's going to be cookies within these internal platforms. Because at that point, they get to dictate and decide their terms of service and how those are used. And so maybe what that'll be is that if you're a user on Facebook, if Facebook creates their own intranet, which is kind of what it's becoming, right? You do you're shopping on Facebook, you're selling stuff on Facebook, you're getting information, you're watching TV on there. They're trying to keep you on there. They're making their own internet. And so if that's the case, then the new cookie will be, and it's already there. If I launch an ad, whether I'm a small business and I'm boosting something or I'm launching a more sophisticated ad, I have an option to select, target all the people who have liked my page and their friends. That's cookies, right?
Yeah.
And you can develop funnels. I mean, look at Petro even, and we don't even market to patients at Petro. We market to physicians. I have it set up where some of my campaigns where it's if somebody's liked or engaged with my page, remarket to them. If the thing that I've remarketed to them, let's say it's a video, if they watched a certain amount of that video, remarket to them again with something that's more deeper in the funnel, and you go all the way down until they convert over. That's cookies. So that's if cookies is obliterated from the face of the earth, which I really don't see happening, but imagine that it does, it's just going to evolve into something else. It's not going to go away.
Thank you. And Keith?
I actually agree. I think it's going to affect organizations. I think it may affect organizations like Google more so. Organizations that don't have an inherent ecosystem like Amazon or Facebook. I think to Omar's point, they are going to have internal cookies. They are going to have different mechanisms to really understand every single individual's profile and then use that data to sell to advertisers without necessarily cookies. So I think it really is going to depend on understanding the patient or the consumer that you're tracking, and then what does this consumer look like? Who are they? What's their psychographic profile? What's their lifestyle? Where do they go? What do they like? What are their interests? What are they going to look up? Because if we do get to a point where we cannot track them now necessarily around the internet, it will be, where do these consumers go then to get information? Where do they go to get entertainment? And then partnering with those third-party platforms to advertise on their platforms. And then once we do, I think to Omar's point, they will be able to tell us to a certain degree of how many what percentage or how many, of these types of profiles do they have within their platforms. But I think that's what the future is going to really look like in about probably 3 to 5 years.
Keith, you get the last word, and then Keith, Omar gets the last word. And I'm already curious if I can have you guys on again, because I want to talk about how do you do profiling and how do you come up with this stuff. So I'm coming at it from the legal angle, and I'm always fascinated by marketing. So Keith, you first. Takeaway points.
Takeaway points from a profiling standpoint. It's really understanding. It's really understanding through the market research. Really, who is your consumer? This is not just from a pharmaceutical standpoint. This is any product, right? It's understanding what is your target market, and segmenting that target market. Who is most likely to need or, want your product. From a pharmaceutical standpoint, obviously, it's those that are diagnosed with this. But it's understanding there's going to be that bell curve, right, where we're not going to be able to, to really necessarily pinpoint the outer edges of that bell curve. But that majority, what does that majority look like? What other conditions, possibly comorbidities, are they suffering from? Where do they get their information from? Where would they likely, go from? Is it possibly WebMD? Is it possibly to a different society? Are there different chat groups? Are there different support groups? Where do these people go, even for entertainment? What is, not just from an age standpoint, but what are they enjoying? What do they do from a psychographic lifestyle standpoint? Is it an older demographic, younger demographic? So really, it's working with your teams to uncover every aspect we can possibly think of. So, and someone said this to me a long time ago, that if you were going to buy a Christmas present or a Hanukkah present or a birthday present for your customer, what would it be? Because there's nothing more generic and nothing more that says, I don't even know who you are or what you like, than a gift card. Right. And how many times do we buy gift cards for even family members because we don't even give enough thought into what do they like? What should I really get them? So that's one of the things. If you were going to buy a present for your customer, specifically, what would you buy them? I think when you can get to that point, you can really understand who they are, where they're going, and then how to possibly talk to them and reach them and engage with them.
Great. Thank you. Omar, last word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to kind of riff a little bit off of what Keith just said, and I think that has to do with, really having a good sense of curiosity and using the things that are right in front of you. I mean, look, I wrote an article that seemed to be, I guess, semi-viral a few weeks ago called "The Death of Medical Sales." It's on my LinkedIn profile, talking about that. Look, this has been a trend that's been there for a while, which is physicians using social media and on there. And, what better tool do you have as a marketer or a salesperson than something that's publicly available, where, again, not only can you see what kind of clinical things the physician's interested in, but what are they interested in as a person? Are they interested in becoming a leader? Do they have a YouTube channel? There's plenty of physicians I know who started YouTube channels focused on certain medical topics. They have Instagram pages, they're on Twitter, there are all these things. So I agree with Keith. Like if and I think I'm going to use that actually as a question to some of my salespeople. Like, if you were to buy this physician, and by the way, I just want to make it clear, I don't recommend buying physicians anything because I don't like to deal with Sunshine Act or Stark. Just to be clear. But
agreed. Not that I'm advocating that by any means. Agreed. It's more of a metaphor.
here's my suggestion and tactic. One is asking a question like, if you were to hypothetically buy this person a gift, what would it be and why? Right? And that'll tell you, like, did this person actually go and, again, publicly available information, look at this person's activity on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, a Facebook page if they have it, like the business page, whatever it might be. And on top of that, and look, don't take my word for it. I've been stealing strategies from, billion-dollar SaaS companies for years now. But one of the things that Mark Roberge, who was a chief revenue officer at HubSpot, and I actually interviewed him on my podcast yesterday. He would tell his salespeople, is like, look, if you spend 60 hours a month prospecting, take just 10 of those hours and go online on social media and engage with your customers directly about the topics they're interested in. That's free. You can't there's no application of Sunshine Act for just being nice and resharing somebody's post and commenting, right?
Right.
Period. And I think it's it's brutally obvious to do. So my last word is just be curious, go find your customers online, figure out what they're interested in, what's important to them, and then engage with them the way they want to be engaged with, which is online and not showing up in their email inbox, at work, trying to peddle your product like a snake oil salesman, which I don't want to say, because that's kind of an insult to snake and oil salesmen.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This was really, really good. I hope I can have you both on again. There's so much more to discuss.
Definitely. This is fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This is the DarshanTalks podcast. Regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.